I see you. All right, so GA4 Masterclass, everyone. I'm waiting until slides come up. We're going to be kind of switching between seating and standing, moving around, whatever. So last year we did this masterclass, right? Here, let me see. Turn that off just in case we're getting feedback. So last year we did this masterclass. So coming at it again, how are we going to make this unique and different? And so we wanted to hit a little bit of audience participation, maybe talk about new themes, really try to make this fun because, I mean, this could be a pretty dry topic. So by a show of hands, who's actively using Google Analytics like on a weekly basis? All right, a good percentage of the room. Who likes UA4?
GA4?
Or GA4, sorry. All right, so like 3 people. That's about what we've seen, all right? I was going to kick those people out of the room, but we'll let them stay for now. All right, so we also wanted to try to make this a little bit more fun. So like one of the things we've seen a lot recently is the proliferation of Shrimp Jesus on Facebook. It's a big AI trend happening right now where Facebook can't keep up with this. It's the combination of 2 things that people search for a lot, producing AI images, and they can't really detect them. So we figured that maybe if we could take some of this virility and we would create GA4 Masterclass becoming GA4 Jesus. So this is our analytics Jesus class. We're going to get you to the place where you feel like you can do things in this platform, really sort of taking it to the next level. So a little bit about us. I'm Lawry. I am the SVP of Strategy and Insights at Miles Partnership. I've been working in the travel space for about 12 years now. Started as a full-stack LAMP developer. That stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And I currently oversee all marketing technology for Miles Partnership. Prolific Googler, a voracious collector of all hobbies. My hobby is collecting hobbies. I've got a lot of them. And unlike a lot of people yesterday, I would say I am an actual expert on this topic, so we can ask a lot of questions today. And then we have Paul.
Hi, my name is Paul McLeod. I'm the Director of Analytics at Simpleview. I've been there for almost 13 years now. I came in on the SEO side, so digital marketing background like Gray, and spending a lot of time moving data around from Google Analytics into spreadsheets, and then figuring out what it all means is how I ended up becoming a data guy eventually. So it's nice to keep the GA4 thing going with this, and that's a lot of, we work with a lot of different types of data, but GA4 is a big thing all the time.
And then we have Justin.
And I'm Justin Gibbs. I've been at Miles for 9 years now, so I have about 9 years in travel experience. I also started doing SEO at Miles before moving into the analytics space. I also started doing some LAMP development and a lot of web development back in my early days, and I'm also a collector of maybe not so much hobbies, but activities, which makes it hard to actually get anything done because I'm just always out away from the house.
Where do you live, actually?
I'm in Denver.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense.
Paul, you're in Tucson, and I'm in Sarasota, Florida, so covering a lot of the country. So this is your mantle today. We're talking about a lot of different stuff. And so what are we going to cover on this mantle? We did some introductions. We're going to take a step back in time and look at some of the stuff we covered last year, some of the basics around GA4. We had a conversion study that we teased last year in conjunction with future partners to understand what the value of events are on a site. We've made some progress on that. We want to roll that out today. We want to talk about things that we love about GA4, things that we hate, review some of the platform updates that have occurred over the last year, because there's been a lot of them. And then we had a form that when you registered, you could put in questions. And so we wanted to address all those questions, and then with whatever time we had left, we were going to go through and take open questions from the audience. We're connected to the internet. We have a laptop up here, so we're going to try to solve them on the fly, figure out what account to use. So hopefully we get it all done. None of us are the least busy people in our company, so putting this all together at the last minute, we have no idea how long it's going to run or how it goes. But we're all in this ride together, right? So last season, the big thing was sort of this, how many days left do we have before Universal goes away? And so at this point last year, I think there was about 81 days left. And this is very fitting because we're pretty much at about the same point that they're going to delete all of the Universal Analytics data. I don't know if everyone got that email within the last week. So that countdown slide, we thought about adding another one to it, but pretty much all of the data that's within Universal accounts, the GA4, or the Universal API will be deprecated and gone after July 1st. So we're going to talk about sort of exporting that. We talked about the history of Google Analytics, where it came from, right? This idea of UTM codes were introduced in around 2003 by a company called Urchin. That's what UTM stands for, Urchin Tracking Parameters. Google bought Urchin, in 2005. So they didn't actually make Google Analytics. They bought it, then rebranded it. They changed it from just GA to Universal Analytics in 2011. Then they bought another company called Firebase in 2014. And Firebase in GA4, the exact same thing. So if you're keeping track, all Google Analytics, none of it was developed by Google. All of it was purchased and then rebranded as Google Analytics. So they have a pretty good track record of not actually creating things and just buying it and rebranding it as Google Analytics, which is where some of the problems come in, I think, with GA4. In 2017, they launched some new tags. They have app plus web properties where they took Firebase, combined it to make that, and then they basically said in 2020, GA4 is going to become the new GA. One of the big things we talked about and why it's Miles and Simpleview up here is this idea of smiles, and we had MGY participate too, supposed to be smiley for a little bit, where we tried to come up with a tracking schema that was consistent. So a lot of GA4 is very customizable. And I think, Paul, you have access to something like 600 accounts within BigQuery. Yeah, and we're at like 200 to 300. So when everything is named completely differently, it makes our lives really hard. And when you want to do benchmarking, it's kind of impossible. And so we talked about how do we normalize the schema of our events? How do we do things that we are all understanding that we're calling this thing this, so that it's not different from account to account? We can do benchmarking. That's where that conversion study is going. It's what kind of brought this sort of consortium together of let's keep things the same.
And just to emphasize, that works for this market for DMOs because there are 4, 5, 6 things that basically every DMO has as a KPI on their website. Referring to partners, filling out RFPs, signing up for emails and newsletters. Those things apply to almost every DMO site, so it makes sense to standardize that.
Yeah, interactions around member businesses, guide orders, essentially. And then we released this conversion study, which we're going to dive into a little bit more and actually have a link where you guys can express interest in that if it's something you would like to do. We talked about the difference, right, of Universal Analytics to GA4 and how everything is more scoped differently. So everything is events in GA4. They weren't even going to have sessions initially. They added them in after analysts complained extensively because it was built on apps. There was no such thing as a page view. It was a screen view or screen class. And it was all event-based, and then those events had parameters where in Universal Analytics it was more of a user. A user automatically created a session, and then you had different types of hits, right? You have a page view hit, you have a social interaction hit, a custom event hit, and an e-commerce hit. So 4 different types of hits. And so in GA4, everything is the same. They're all an event. And a page view is an event with the name of page view. A outbound link is an event with the name of outbound link. And parameters take place of the category, action, label, and value parameters that you were used to in Universal Analytics, which can make this a lot more challenging because it's not all grouped into the same buckets for every single client.
Yeah. That, I will say, this may seem a little in the clouds or abstruse, but what's cool about it, it makes it more complicated in some ways, but it also allows us greater flexibility. With everything being an event, sort of all the building blocks are the same in a lot of ways, which means you can build up tracking, and we'll show some examples later, that just can capture almost anything that is actually being done on the website by the user in a much more flexible and detailed way than you could in Universal Analytics, I find.
Yeah, it's really powerful. It's what a lot of other platforms have been doing for years. Like, it's a good change. At the same time, I think what made Universal Analytics powerful, especially for this group, is that we had a level of standardization built in. And so our job and our goal was to create that standardization between 2 companies, 3 companies that do a lot of work together. And so that standardization is needed in order for us to compare performance. And if you're your own business and you're not comparing performance against someone else in the same vertical, then configure it however you want. But generally, destinations like to compare themselves against other destinations. So if we don't take a little bit of forethought into how we set things up, that's not exactly possible. So that's what we've been really working towards as a group here. One of the other big things and why I think you've seen the push to GA4 faster than I think anyone really wanted is while it's not GDPR compliant out of the box, it does provide more tools around compliance and consent mode, which has become a big thing. Most people that are marketing now within the EU are probably out of compliance per the DMA Acts of March 1st, where you have to have a consent banner that actually explicitly blocks cookies. I know, Paul, you have some clients that have had to do that. Most of the clients we've had that have implemented things like that are like, can you please take that off? I've lost all of my traffic, and I don't know how I'm going to tell my board that I'm now 50% lower than I was when someone has to click accept in order to get tracked.
Yeah,
So,
we've been trying to get ahead of it. I had a client who just, they have an initiative to install more of a cookie consent thing on their site. They're a US destination, so they don't necessarily need to give their US visitors the option to decline all cookies, whereas the European ones, they're supposed to be. And basically, they have a lot of their KPIs and their metrics for evaluating all their marketing stuff based around web metrics, GA4 sessions, and derived metrics from that. And yeah, we were warning them, you could totally lose every single number that you're trying to track for your bonuses if you go through this. We can't promise that it'll be a disaster, but the numbers will almost certainly change. So you have to be ready for it.
Yeah, and Google has done some work trying to make the numbers, like fill in the gaps with modeling, and it's the reason that they kind of rolled out this platform a little bit earlier, and it is fairly GDPR compliant. The number one issue with the compliance aspect is Google will not guarantee the servers that store the data are located not in the US. And so the transfer of data transatlantically is the number one problem. However, every other piece of it is actually compliant, except that. And so that's where the sticking point kind of comes to.
And to be fair, the idea of the physical location of the server really mattering in today's day and age is silly a little bit.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I still have a pain in the ass dealing with different regions between servers on cloud compute. So, you know, that's a problem for another day. We talked about key concepts, the idea that these are metrics within Universal Analytics, and these are the definitions within GA4, right? In Universal Analytics, the primary user metric was just total number of users. That is not the primary metric within GA4. The primary metric within GA4 is an active user, which is someone that has engagement, which has a completely different definition. So there's a lot to the specifics between one platform to another, and it's why numbers are not always going to line up. And so I have a QR code later in this where you can scan it, and we'll bring you to the pages that kind of define the difference between dimensions and metrics between the platforms, because these are the building blocks of sort of analytics, and it's very important to understand the differences from one platform to another. Conversions were a big thing as well, the way that the counts worked. We talked about that. There's been some updates to that we'll talk about in a little bit. But there was a lot of difference between conversions, which are now called key events within GA4, and the way conversions worked in UA, where one was once per session, and in GA4, it was once per action. So in the old model, if you ordered 15 visitors guides, you would get 1 goal. In the new model, you would get 15 conversions or goals. And there was no way to update that. They rolled out some releases where you can basically say which version you want, but that was a major difference that we talked about. User engagement, this is a whole nother number set. Paul's gonna dive into this a little bit with engagement time later. Like, this is the quick wrap time. We're gonna get into some more specifics. And when I say quick, I know this is dragging on a little bit. Another big part is the linking. There is a lot of linking built into GA4. I would make an argument that GA4 is no longer an analytics platform, and it's more like an extension of Google Ads. Yeah. And it feels that way because every new release is tied to some sort of linking between ads in GA4, and the fact that you can't actually even like bid on ads anymore, and you gotta let Google do it for you, or you don't have a good performance score as a partner. It's a whole thing. But I would say GA4 is pretty much Google Ads at this point.
I mean, honestly, the whole reason GA has ever existed is to help people buy ads from Google more. So
agreed.
It continues apace.
But there are some cool links, some of which work, some of which don't. We've done previews around floodlight links, which are links to CM360. They worked at some points, then they stopped working, then they shared all of our clients' data with other clients. Like, they're kind of a mess. And then some of them work well, like ad manager links. Like, that one's really nice, something that was only available in 360 previously. So there's a lot of linking to be done. One thing that we talked a lot about was sampling and thresholding. And so anytime you're in the platform and you're seeing this little red thing at the top that says something's going on with this, this is a threshold applied. And so that means that there is either too much data or not enough of an action happened per user. This happened a lot when you were using a blended report identity. This is a little bit technical, and it's something that we all recommended last year, was using a blended identity that included Google Signals data. The problem with that is if you didn't have something that took place at least 50 times, that row just didn't show up in your data. And the benefit to it was that you would actually be able to see if you had a repeat user that was on a mobile device, a computer, because none of us have logged in users. And so it would actually take that Google ID and apply it across multiple devices. And so you could get an understanding of what an actual user was doing, even if that user wasn't logged in, by piggybacking on Google's IDs. The problem is they didn't want to share that data too granularly, so they just excluded data. It became a big problem. And so I will give credit to tourism economics. They were the ones that said, let's not use this, and then we turned it off on all their clients, and then subsequently, 3 months after that or so, Google was like, yeah, this feature doesn't work very well, and we're getting rid of it, so it doesn't exist anymore. But it has some good benefits to it, but the downsides, I think, were too great, and I think all of us liked the benefits. We didn't see the major issue with it, but it did wreak some havoc, and so they've removed that from the application. We looked through interfaces and reports. We'll get into this a lot more, the difference between reports, explorers, libraries, all that kind of stuff. This is the Explore interface. We'll get into that again. And then Justin touched on setup and configuration.
All right, and then I was showing everybody how to actually set a lot of this stuff up in Google Analytics. So what we're showing here is just if I'm tracking events in Google Analytics via Google Tag Manager, we can set up the event name in the back end of the UI, and then you actually have to go in and toggle them as a conversion. So all conversions start off as events. Kind of like Gray mentioned earlier, everything is basically an event, but then we take that and we turn it into a conversion. And then they just changed something with this. So it used to track every single time that action actually took place, but now you can set some settings to say, no, I only want that to happen once per action or once per session, so you don't get all these duplicate conversions counted. So some of that has actually changed since we met last year.
Which is also nice because that's how it was in Universal Analytics
Yeah.
for goals. So we can match that and have more of an apples-to-apples thing now.
And it's how it should be, because a lot of times, like if you fill out a form and you go to a thank you page and then you end up like going back and you end up on the thank you page again, that tracks as two. That doesn't make any sense. So now we can actually deduplicate that. But now we can also use events to define custom audiences and send those back up to Google Ads, which I think is really cool. So you can segment a lot of your audiences and say, hey, like if they filled out a form and they came from, this certain industry page or, a different activity page, they're probably interested in this thing. So we're going to put them in the bucket or the audience that is defined by that thing, and then we can market to them specifically. So it's a really cool way to segment the audiences.
Yeah, on the audiences are probably one of the most powerful features in GA4. You can actually have them trigger a conversion or a key event as well. When someone does something, make a conversion happen. That's a way that we do time on page or pages per session conversions, because it's not an event, it's when something occurs. In addition to that, there are some cool tools like BigQuery, Instant BQML, where you can basically have machine learning-based audiences that are generated within the GA4 side, and then basically that propensity for churn or purchase can then be pushed out to CM360, DV360, GA, Google Ads, all those different places. It's a pretty cool thing, and it's a very powerful part of GA4.
And like you said, it's no coincidence that it's the most powerful part of it, because the purpose of this thing is to get you to buy more ads on Google.
Agreed.
So yeah, think about like what type of audiences like you want to segment based on the actions they can perform on your website. And then here I was just showing how to set up some of those custom metrics and dimensions last year. So you do have to actually go in and set those up in the UI if you want to see it in your standard reporting. Otherwise, it's going to get recorded, but you're not going to actually be able to look at it in the UI, which, I don't think everybody here probably loves that, because you think, hey, I set up my tracking and then I don't see any of the reports. So that's something we get a lot of questions about. But it's not that difficult to go in and set up.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to not try to, I guess he's probably taking care of it. Anyway, so one of the cool things that I really like about GA4 that is new, that wasn't so much around in UA, is that you can export the data into other systems. In particular, they make it super easy to export it into BigQuery, which is a Google product. Google BigQuery is, it's a big cloud database system. Basically, really powerful, fancy spreadsheets that live on Google's computers and not yours. And what's nice about this is when we export the data, we don't get like the number of sessions per day. We don't get the number of page views per day. We get the actual raw event data, down to every time somebody scrolls on your web page, we get a row in the database that says they scrolled it was this time, they were on this page, they went this far down the page, things like that. So you end up with just thousands and thousands, if not millions, of these hits coming in all the time. And that allows us to do a number of great things. One of the main great things is that it allows us to analyze it almost any way we want if we have the tools and the ability. And then the other thing is that it allows us to archive and store this data, which is a huge deal because one of the main differences between GA4 and Universal Analytics is that after, at most 14 months, a lot of the details of your reports get removed and taken away. So for instance, the page that people looked at after 14, that's still the case, yes?
I believe it's 14 or 18 months in standard reports and explorers. I don't believe there's a limit.
Okay, that's it, yeah. But a lot of that stuff just gets hard to look up, or harder to look up and keep around after that period. So with BigQuery, we can keep it a lot more. These are just some brief examples of the steps needed to do it. If you get these slides, honestly, the sample data set from last year is probably still there. So you could go try this. But you basically have to set up a little BigQuery account. Then you have to connect your data. And then once you have it, it comes in to these tables. You get a table in there every day that has all the events from that day. And then you can see on the right, I don't want to get too deep into database stuff, but those are some of the fields, some of the information. So you can see this gives you a quick idea of how the information is structured. So we get a row for every event in these tables. And then you can see the information. We know the date, we know the time, we know the name of the event, and then we get some information about the user, their ID, their device, where they're from, all that sort of stuff. And this stuff will, this is the same information that's powering your reports in GA4, but now you have the raw stuff for yourself here in BigQuery. So just real quick overview of some of the information. The event timestamp is one of the most important things. This gives you the number of microseconds since 1970 or whenever the era started when the event happened. The event name, this is super valuable. I mean, this is sort of the main thing that differentiates one event from another. You can name it anything you want. There are a number of standard ones that you see here. Those are all built into GA4, and they'll just start getting events for them as soon as you put the tag on your site. But you can actually name an event anything. You could name it, for instance, as Gray was showing with the tracking schema we have for custom events. We have partner_referral for when somebody clicks off to a partner site, even though obviously some of you are member-based. We can name it that, though, just because that's the thing that makes the most sense within the industry.
There are predefined ones, and there's custom.
Yeah, exactly. These are all the custom, or these are all the predefined ones. There are more besides this about videos and things.
Yeah. I will say, this is probably one of the more complex parts of GA4. It's also one of the more interesting things,
Yeah.
but it's also taken a significant amount of time to work with this data. It comes in a very unfriendly format. It's very nested, which means there's basically tables within tables that require a lot of SQL or Python proficiency. There are different ways to work with it. Paul uses something called DBT.
Yeah.
There's also Dataform, which is a competitor to DBT that Google purchased like 3 years ago, then you didn't hear about them and then released recently. There's Python, because basically you have to take this data and re-aggregate it to be able to use it in reporting, because this is too granular and it will cost you a crap ton of money if you keep querying these tables over and over and over again, because even though they are what is called date sharded, where each date is a different table, you have to process that data and aggregate it, or you're going to be spending a lot of money trying to redo that on every query and writing a lot of sort of nested SQL. It becomes a whole thing, and even the event timestamp that Paul said is geared on the epic date, which is like January 1st, 1970. Basically, it increments by microseconds, and that's what a timestamp is. If you actually query by that, you're going to cost yourself a lot more money. If you query by the date partition or the date shard and just say it happened on this date because it's the table shard, you save yourself a considerable amount of money because you're not taking seconds and taking those seconds, converting them to time, and then converting that to a day. You're just using something that's already pre-converted. And so those details are probably what have destroyed our lives for the last year of saying, do I want to spend $30 a day querying this? and doing this for all clients, or do I think I can make a small change that will allow me to do it for 17? And like that is really, really technical in the weeds, but it's what our jobs have all become as opposed to just running a UA report for people.
Yeah. Yeah, to make use of this, we have a whole system that runs basically 12 jobs on each of the 600 sites we have data for every day to turn it from this raw data with just the rows for the events into like tables that have a row for each session or a row for each page view on the site, which makes it a lot faster, not only cheaper, but then faster to actually look up the data when you're looking at a report.
Yeah, and there was one other thing on this why this is important and why you don't just use the API is let's say you wanted to see who from a city looked at a specific page on your website. I don't know if you tried to use a full page name parameter in the API. I'm guessing no, because it's kind of a nerdy thing that probably we've only done and a few other people. And then pair that with a secondary dimension of city. That is a unsupported metric dimension combination, and it will not give you that data.
Yeah.
So you run into those metric dimension conflicts constantly via the API. But if you have the BigQuery export, you can sort of mash up things as you want.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll show some examples later of some of the really powerful things we're able to build for tracking, really advanced sort of web stuff. Here in GA4, using the BigQuery export, and that allows us to then report on it in other tools that we never could have done in Universal Analytics. We wouldn't have been able to track the things we need to track with the way tracking was set up for custom things, and we wouldn't have been able to get the data out at the level of detail we need to build a whole standalone analytics package on top of it. So we'll get to that eventually after we finish our little wrap up here, which has taken about half an hour. That's pretty good.
Yeah, not bad.
All right. So here are some links to some resources. A lot of these are just real basic stuff that will get you started. Things like, Simo Ahava, I highly recommend him. He goes really hard, really deep on all the technical aspects of implementing GA4 and GTM. But all these resources are great for getting you started on, we can't teach you all the details of everything you're going to need to know about GA4 here today, but there are lots of good resources out there to continue.
Yeah, and there will be a link to this either in the app or afterwards to a PDF that you can download, and we'll probably add a couple more in here. This is from last year. I think GA4 SQL, if you ever want to actually query stuff, it's a generator that will write the SQL for you. I write very good SQL, and I use it because it is very time-consuming to write it yourself. So if you just pick what you need, it will generate the queries for you.
There you go. I like how you put GA4.com at number 1 on here.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty direct.
I don't think I've ever been to GA4.com.
I honestly don't remember what's there.
Yeah.
All right, so that was the recap, 1/3 of the presentation. And so now we're going to get into some new stuff that's happened. So one of the big things that we talked about is the standardization of events and parameters is this idea of a conversion study, something that we wanted to do in conjunction with future partners. We got a lot of interest in it last year, and over the last 12 months, we've been working on sort of figuring out what is the cheapest that we can do this for, how many participants do we need to be able to do what we think we can do, and we kind of came up with a proposal here. So I'm never a fan of selling anything in these. I always want to educate, but there will be a place to express interest because, in all honesty, it's going to be a real pain in the ass if I try to email every one of you individually. And so if you express interest here, it's saving me a lot of time. And like I said, we're all busy people here, right? So basically, the idea of this survey is that we want to explore actions that occurred on the website tied to GA4 events with a standardized schema that Simpleview or Miles will set up on your behalf, then do a website user intercept survey saying, are they interested? Have they already decided to visit? The standard surveys type stuff, and then do a user follow-up survey. And so here's a QR code that you can scan, qarts.com. It's an AI generator, so we have our GA4 Jesus here again, and it will take you to a Google form if you want. And there's no commitment on it. It's just basically if you're interested, you can say you're a Miles client, a Simpleview client, if you have an account rep, and basically we'll reach out to you and say this is the gist of it, and all the details are on there. A few more of the details is we have to make this very uniform between everyone in order to do it at a pretty cheap price point. Typically a conversion study is about a $50,000 proposition when we do it with a partner. We're trying to get this in for under $6,000 so that we can do it at scale, but there's still a lot of work to set that up. And so you would have 10 questions or less that are standardized across all destinations, 20 questions or less for the follow-up. It would all be a select one or select all, max 7 questions. It would be not have custom questions, and it would be very templated look here are some examples of like what that could look like. It's a little pop-up form that would basically say like, yes, I'm interested in this survey. And then you get a report that said, you know, users live here, these people viewed this type of pages, 60% of the traffic had already decided to visit you, so like you're not helping to convert them, but can you actually influence what they're doing in destination? And then where are they at the point of travel planning process? Are they on a desktop device, a mobile device? What's the intended type of travel, the average intended trip length, the month of visit, all that kind of stuff. And then we would actually start combining this with the GA4 data. So using that audience tool, we'd be using Informisely here, and we'd basically say like, these are people that are interested but have not yet booked. And we'd build that custom audience, and then within the Explore section of GA4, we could go in and say, the people that are interested but have not booked had a greater time on site than those that have already booked or that are not interested in booked. They looked at events views or made guide requests, and we can start to tie those actions and those parameters, and we can start to assign values to those conversions or goals. Because one of the features within GA4 with conversions is they want you to assign a value to a conversion. So every time someone that orders a visitor's guide, like let's have $10 assigned to that. Every time someone clicks from a partner business profile page out to that partner business, maybe that's worth $2. So by getting a large group of destinations to participate, we all have the same naming conventions. We can now actually assign values in a meaningful way across 800 something sites, right? That's impossible to do without doing some sort of study like this, and so we just set them at 0, or we willy-nilly pick a number. That's really all we have until we actually do some research to assign value to this.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize the power of that, because we have people coming to us all the time saying like, how should I measure my site? What are my KPIs for my website? Or they'll come to us and say, you know, like, I'm obsessed with the number of sessions or users I have, just like very basic, broad reach metrics. And we try to say like, look, you know, those aren't the greatest metrics. They don't necessarily indicate, you know, somebody just having a number of sessions on your site doesn't necessarily indicate influence on intent to travel. And beyond that, it's also highly subject to things that are beyond your control, like what Google decides the rankings for national parks should be, or something like that, which, you know, will swamp whatever SEO efforts you have in many cases. So between it not necessarily connecting that well to the mission of the organization and being difficult for you to do anything about in many cases, we don't think those are the greatest metrics. With this, we can start to look at, okay, what actions on the website can we concretely tie to people actually visiting, actual impact on our destinations, which means we can pick better KPIs, we can measure ourselves and operate towards things that are more valuable to the actual destination. And then furthermore, once we have those values put in for the conversions, this is what's super cool if you think about it just a little bit. Now, I can look at a session where somebody, say, signed up for a newsletter and maybe looked at the wedding section, and I can compare that to somebody who maybe clicked through to refer off to 3 different partner hotel sites. And because I have numerical values on all those things, I can start to add up and say which one of those sessions is more valuable. Then I can add up across the site and I can say which of my landing pages are producing the most value, which of my marketing campaigns are producing the most value.
And what channels did they come from, and how much was my cost per acquisition? And so is the person
Exactly.
that made me $6 in economic impact or whatever you wanted to
It
find.
makes it so much more easy to compare different efforts in an apples-to-apples way and then make good decisions.
So we're trying to get to 50 destinations on this at a price point of $5,900. If we don't get up to 50, then the price will scale back and forth. The majority of this is going to future partners to run the study, and then us to make sure that everything is implemented correctly. We have to get the GA4 tags, all that kind of stuff set up. We do prefer to be Miles and Simpleview clients because, in all honesty, we already have access to the sites, and it cuts down the time a great deal. But if you're not one of our clients and you're interested, you can also fill it out, and we'll see if we can make that happen. But there's work that goes into this, setting tags up, getting all that stuff, the follow-up, the feedback, all that kind of stuff. There will also be a big wrap report at the end as well. We're probably not going to launch this by May 1st, if I'm being honest. That would be very unrealistic, but the idea is to have it as a 3-month period and then do follow-ups after that. Ultimately, it's something that think it would work really well, but if there's not as much interest, then that's a year of our lives talking about it gone. Sorry, that was depressing. So with that, and let's talk a little bit about reflecting, right? So what we thought we would do is each one of us would talk a little bit about like a year of working within Google Analytics 4 and what our like pros and cons are of the platform, and then we would go into some update releases and then ultimately sort of answer individual questions.
What,
So go ahead.
what was your prompt for that AI image?
I think, it's going the wrong way here. My prompt for the AI image was something about a woman in a picturesque, serene place looking at a lake with a mountain reflecting on data in the water. And then I think
It got really literal on that one.
I think
what I like to see
Dali
out there.
then rewrote it, and then I didn't like what Dali put out because it wasn't actually as realistic as I wanted, so then I put it in Midjourney and then did a couple different variations. So yeah, images are time consuming, but I think every image in here, other than a few icons, Paul's picture and screenshots are AI generated for what it's worth, including this little bar on the left-hand side. And then that picture of me is also my Russian oligarch AI generated picture. So if I'm looking at things that I love, right, that's what the heart indicates, not AI generated. I think the Explore tool is really powerful. I have a love-hate relationship with it because it can do a whole lot. It also could use a lot of effort and work on it. One of the main examples would be I can make all these great tables, but the tables look like absolute garbage because I can't resize the column widths. So like things wrap. I can't turn on or off the heat bars, I don't believe. There's just a lot of like small nuanced things that are terrible, but you didn't really have a tool like this in Universal. And I do think that you're going to start seeing, there are essentially two sides of GA4, right? You have standard reports and you have explorers. We've seen in one instance, they have merged Explore style reports into standard reports. And I think over time, you're gonna see the Explore reports become standard reports in many cases, but it's not quite there yet. And so I think if you're toying around with where to spend time and invest in GA4, learn how to use Explorers because you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck than trying to make things work within the standard reports. And I'll go through a little example of how something that used to be really easy is really tough, and there's 4 different ways to do it in GA4 in a minute. The second thing that I really hate, so this is my hate for GA4, makes me want to stab myself in the eye, is the fact that I have to do everything twice, right? So traditionally, you would create an event, and you'd have your category, your action, your label, and it would just go into the system. In GA4, you have to do your event name, your parameters, and then you have to go set up your parameters and your event in GA4 in the UI, but you can't do it instantly because they're not available there yet. You have to wait a day or 2. So if you're like me, you do the one thing and then you forget about the second thing. And then it's fun because then you can't actually do the thing you need to do because you didn't set them up. So like that ongoing drawn out process I find to be excruciating, and I absolutely hate it. You want to just go?
Yeah, I already talked about the BigQuery expert, so I won't go into it too much, but I do want to emphasize that the power it gives us to really use GA4 to build very advanced analytics things on anything in an app or a website is cool. And again, we'll show some examples later, so we can move on. The thing I hate, yeah, thresholding, it's so annoying. Especially because it'll happen and you don't even realize it. Like you'll just be looking at your number of wedding information requests by day.
And you probably don't get 50 of them a day, right?
Exactly. And then so you'll do the explore, you'll look at it, and you'll be like, why do I only have 3 days in the last month? What happened? And then you're like, oh, I can't even look this up. They won't.
And then you go to BigQuery and you write a really complex query to get that data.
Yeah, I could do it in BigQuery, but maybe I'm working with a client that I don't have the BigQuery export for, and then you just don't have it. So I get why they did it. I also feel like Google's whole privacy philosophy with GA4 is hypocritical and confused in that they have things like this. Like the reason they have thresholding is so that you can't look up, you can't too easily identify a single user and their activity on your site and then do whatever bad thing you might do to them with that information. But then they also give you the Google BigQuery export where you can get absolutely all that information and totally do all those things.
And you can't see it in the report, but you can send it to Google Ads if you want.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all, it feels like there's a lot of, I'll just say ass covering in a lot of their policies there. And it's annoying to just have to work around it, mostly for theater reasons. It's a lot like TSA security, really.
Yeah. I'll also say, we were talking about this earlier, I think a lot of GA4 is geared around like saving Google money. When you've been storing data for Universal Analytics in databases that no one pays for years and years and years, you're like, oh shit, I could basically free up like $30 million or $300 million worth of data by deleting this stuff and basically saying like, we're not gonna give you as granular data moving forward, we're just gonna give you 14 or 18 months worth. You can't do a whole lot with it, but if you want more, like you can pay for it yourself. Like there's a lot to the whole like, we just don't wanna pay for this anymore because it's free, and like unless like you're gonna pay for it yourself, we're just not gonna give it to you anymore. And so when you start to look at things of like, from that lens, who I think the person at Google that came up with this is like, yeah, make them pay for it. I was like, that person is a genius. They probably got promoted quite a bit because they just cut a ton of costs, and now people are paying for something, and they got a ton of new cloud customers, which when you rank people by how many customers you have on either Azure or Amazon or Google, they just got hundreds of thousands of new customers. So now they're the leading cloud provider. So whoever that was, very smart person.
I 100% endorse that. That is what happened.
Justin?
I actually really like the event parameters because even though the category action label in Universal Analytics would allow you to feed the data in automatically, I think the event parameters allow it to make a lot more sense for the common user who might not know where to dig for everything. So you can open up your standard report and look for your partner referrals, and that's what it's called. It's called partner referrals, and it's all right there. So I think that that's a really cool feature. Who's seen this message? Or who's emailed me asking why your data is not loading in Google Analytics for? Nobody? Maybe it's my own problem.
Yeah.
The solution to that is just hitting refresh over and over and over until,
All right.
nope, it's run, okay. But basically, like the UI doesn't always want to load, and so I get so many questions of people saying, hey, my analytics isn't set up, I'm getting zeros, how come there's no numbers? The answer is to just refresh it. So that's something I hate. And these damn pop-ups. Gosh, and just when you just think that you've cleared out all the pop-ups, more started.
I can't believe they didn't give us any option for like, go away and don't tell me about this ever again.
I'm
I don't
done
need to see
setting
it
this
every
up,
time I load.
exported my data, I'm good.
What was really fun is when you said like, no, I don't want an automatic export, and then they did automatic exports for everyone, and then you had double data in your
Yeah.
accounts. So like, that was a really fun thing to deal with. Again, I think all of us have done a lot of free consulting work this year, and like being like, well, no one's gonna pay for this, but like, if we don't do it, everything's going to be fucked up. So like, we just kind of have to do it.
Yeah.
That was a lot of our life this last year, and like now it's like, you got 90 days until we delete all your data, like hurry up and run. Like, so we get through one and then it's the next one. It's been a fun year in the analytics world.
Oh yeah.
So a lot has changed over the last year. So we're gonna run through these real quick so that we leave time for like actually getting into data and going through studies. Right after we had this session last year, Google was like, we're getting rid of all attribution except for 2 different types. They said we're gonna get rid of first click, linear, time decay, and position-based attribution. I'm guessing not all of you guys use those, but they were actually pretty convenient. I was a big fan of first click. They basically said we're gonna only have last click, and we're only going to have data-driven attribution. And at this point, the other ones are gone. I'm pretty sure I have a slide of like when it actually happened. I think it was October, but they're gone. So you used to be able to compare methods against each other. Nope, no more. Last click, data-driven attribution. After we presented last year, the conversion counting method thing that we already discussed today, that changed. So now you can do it once per session or once per action. That was a big update. We have funnel reports. So funnel reports were actually really a big release in May. It's the report I was talking about. It's the only Explorer that you can build and then save as a report in the UI. And so sometimes even if you don't want a funnel, it's nice to build a funnel report in the Explorer and then save it to the UI, even if it's not really a funnel, because you can get something from Explorer into the report UI. But they didn't have that in the UI except for like one thing, and if you didn't follow the standard like purchase path, it wouldn't work. So this was like the first merge between those 2 things. I think we're gonna get more of that. In June, they released the business objectives collections. So you'll see this in the screenshot in a little bit, but basically there's a library feature where you can basically build your own sidebar from how you run the reports. And they introduced one called business objectives that had a bunch of different reports in it. So they're like, oh, we don't have enough reports, so like you can go enable this one and we'll put 4 more reports on the sidebar for you.
It kind of just names your reports as the answers to questions you might have.
Yeah.
Like, how are people engaging with my whatever page? Or something.
Yeah, and there's duplicate reports too. I think there's 2 event reports. But it is useful. I think those reports are actually kind of nice, so I usually enable them. Up until August, you could only do like a contains search within the search box in standard reports. For us that have to find things constantly, using regular expressions in reports was super useful. So that's like when you do a pipe for or like wildcards or different type of regular expressions. If you don't use like ChatGPT or any AI to write your regular expressions for you, that is the #1 AI tip I will give you. Regular expressions are horrific to write. It is the absolute worst syntax. Just put what you want, and it's for Google Analytics, and it will write them for you. Like, I want all of these pages in a search. Here's the difference. Write this for me. It will come out perfect every time. Highly recommend. In September, they have consent mode recommendations, so they started to integrate that a lot more. We talked a little bit about that. September 18th, they introduced a new user export report in BigQuery. I can say neither of our agencies use this because, in all honesty, we don't have people creating major accounts on the site that have lots of repeat visitation, so those reports are basically empty. So there is a new report in BigQuery export, but like there's not a whole lot of use for destinations. Like we use them for hotels and things like that.
If you were like a major e-commerce platform and you had repeat customers who came back over and over, that would be really useful there.
This year in October, they introduced calculated metrics, which I don't think any of us knew, but that's like a really nice release. It was something that UA never had, but like other analytics platforms did. So you could basically go in and create your own metrics by saying, I don't think exit rate is a in-platform metric, so like you could create an exit rate metric by using like entrances and exit number and do it as a percentage. And then they finally got rid of the things I was just talking about in October. We now have scheduled emails, because that wasn't a thing up until November. Admin was redesigned in November. They added a bunch of new reports around Campaign Manager 360, DV, Search Ad. We use these. We were in an alpha test for the original linking of CM360. It used to work. It stopped working. It doubled everything up. Now it doesn't work again and is very inconsistent. So I'm going back and forth with different reps on that a lot. But it is very nice to be able to see all your advertising data in GA4. And again, it's like we're hyper privacy focused unless it comes to the fact that like we want to integrate our ad systems, which I think the FTC has some issues with per some stuff that's going on right now. And then actually one more. In February, they introduced manual traffic source dimensions in a report. There was a question that someone posed about not being able to find UTM codes in there. I actually think that they're easier to find, and they went from 5 parameters to 8 in February. And so you just have to use session traffic source, not user. There's a major difference between user traffic sources and session traffic sources. But they added the ability to have source platform, which designates like where stuff is coming from. They added a campaign ID, and they made source medium its own parameter. I'm hoping that campaign ID becomes like a primary key where you can change all the other ones. That used to be how it worked in Adobe. And they added some new advertising section updates. And then finally, they added a primary channel grouping in February. This is a nice one. This actually allows you to go and create a new channel grouping, which I personally don't like channel groupings. I like the old school source medium, so I know what things are called. But if you want to group things together as like social, paid, organic, you do that in channel groupings. And you used to be able to change all of your channel groupings, but you couldn't change the default channel grouping. So by introducing the primary channel grouping, you can organize your data how you want, and it is retroactive, unlike universal. So it will do all of the stuff in historically, and it will become your default in the platform throughout. So this was a very good, big change. And then conversions have moved to key event, which is supposed to simplify things between Google Ads, CM360, and GA4. I think it makes it way more complicated, and I don't understand the name change, but they would want people being confused between Google Ads conversions and GA4 conversions, so they renamed conversions in GA4 to key event. As we see, Google Ads takes precedent over everything these days.
I like that timeline because it shows what I felt, but it really demonstrates how much the platform has changed and grown in the past year. Because one of our main complaints last year when we were 3 months away from being forced to only use it was this thing isn't done. They haven't finished making it. It doesn't work that well in a lot of ways. And it's not perfect now, but they have added a lot of stuff that solves a lot of the issues we have.
And thank you for that, Paul. You killed my segue and my joke about how like they were basically building the plane as they were flying it. That's what it feels like. It's constantly being added onto. So like they basically got something in the air, very like shoddily, and they have people in trucks hanging from the sky bolting things on every day because it is still, I think, not where it needs to be the platform of record, if you will. But it's evolved a lot, and it's continuing to evolve.
I did steal that. I'm sorry. I didn't.
You're good. Figured I'd say something though. And so as of March 13th, like it has officially replaced Universal Analytics, and you have until July 1st, 2024 to get your data out, or we're deleting it because we want to save some money. So how do you do that, right? There's all these guides out there. There's a bunch. For our clients, we basically said, like, with how much time is left, I don't think we're going to be able to get to a custom export for every client. And honestly, this comes down to the free consulting stuff again, because I don't know how I'm going to get paid for it yet, but we're just going to go and do it and figure it out because we don't have that much time left to get it all done. And so we've been, for the last, honestly, since we started converting things over to GA4, looking at the best way to do this. So there's a company called Supermetrics that we use. They make different connectors to Google Sheets and BigQuery and Data Studio. We only use one of their connectors. But what's nice is they have some predefined tables for their BigQuery export, where they group data into things like content, so like pages and views, search, traffic, paid traffic, user-based metrics, technology, so like mobile devices or desktop, iPhone to Android. They have e-commerce events, social, and then all the events exports. So they've already kind of come up with like what's a good schema, because unlike with GA4, you're not getting things at an event row level where it's like this user did this thing, and then I aggregate it together. You only have pre-aggregated data unless you're subscribing to GA360, which had a starting price of $150K per year. Good note on GA4, 360, it's only $50K per year, so it's 1/3 of what it used to cost for anything less than 25 billion hits, I think. So it made it more affordable. But you can't get it out on a row-level basis. You have to figure out what aggregated tables you want. So we spent a lot of work basically taking this schema as a starting point, customizing for destinations, so we have a lot more. Where are people coming from, region, things like that. And then we will run that across every client that we have in their primary profile so that we have that export going back to 2019. The fun part about it is you have to know what goals every client is using and what numbers, and you can't just select them all. So we have to hit their admin API to get a list of what goals are enabled so that we can specifically select those goals to only be included in the import, the export. It's a really fun thing to work on. So we have like a dedicated person just on this project alone right now. I know, Paul, you have some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, by not worrying about goals, I have simplified it. No, I have basically this kind of update, or this backup for all of our clients going back to 2019, but only for major metrics like sessions, page views, session duration, bounces, things like that. So some engagement and some reach. And then we've got it broken down by channel and by device, but not worrying about pages, for instance, is the main thing that's left behind, because that just massively increases the amount of data you're storing. We could do it, just have been waiting. So, but yeah, even for people who do need more in depth, we'll probably use a different tool to do something very similar.
Yeah, it's a fun process, to be honest with you. Again, like I said, it's like you run and there's always a new deadline to deal with. And there's like, oh, we figured it out, and then there's like a new wrench that gets thrown in. So, you know, if we request it in one way, oh, it's too sampled, so we have to request it a different way. So it's constantly trying to figure these things out for us.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, that's enough about that. Let's get into some of the questions that you all asked and get into some details, right? And so we put these slides together at the last minute, and so I put our pictures on here so we knew which was doing which ones, and we didn't get confused. So, Paul, this is your section to lead.
All right. Yeah. So we had a number of questions. It was really nice of eTourism to collect some feedback ahead of time on what people want to know about GA4. So we found some answers to some of these things. Just going over, you know, some of these were one comment from one person and some were common to many. Some of our website metrics are being measured differently with GA4 than in previous years. That's absolutely the case. It's a whole new platform. Like Gray mentioned, the very foundational pieces of the platform are new and have been redone. So I'll show you some examples of how that has changed in just a second. The numbers don't match the previous reports, same idea, I think, again, consistent. Finding the same or compatible information I used to pull from UA. Again, these all go to the same issue. I'll get to that. Learning the new dashboard in general and also explaining to others how GA4 differs from UA and why. Here, you know, hopefully today helps, and then also there are a lot of good Google resources that we can point you to on that. Missing in-page analytics that allow web managers to understand how website visitors navigate. We did have some in-page analytics in Universal Analytics, but they weren't very good. They would like, any link to the same URL would get double counted basically on the page. So you can.
We were thinking that was in regards to like when you would say like view this on top of the page.
Yeah.
So like it would show like how many times a link was clicked on
Yeah.
a page itself. None of us actually use that report because it's highly inaccurate. So like we haven't really had an issue with that, because basically if the same link was on there more than once, so like let's say you were on your homepage and you had a link to things to do 3 times, like it would show the same number 3 times. So you would be 100%, 100%, 100%, so you're overcounting by 300% because it didn't have a way to differentiate the links from like one link to another because it was just looking at the URL itself, not the actual point of click on the location. And if you need something like that, Hotjar or something like that is a good solution. However, it is extremely heavy on your website, so
Yeah.
I have love-hate relationship with those types of things.
So yeah, to address all these things though, yeah, so first let's just talk about some definitions of metrics and dimensions just so we're clear. These terms are used not just in Google Analytics, but in a lot of different data sources and data analysis tools. So a metric is a quantitative measurement. They're the numerical values. The way I like to think about it is if you've got more than one row of data, say you've got rows for different events and stuff, if you are trying to aggregate those rows into one thing, if you're trying to sum up the data, the metrics are the things that are numbers that you can add together. So you can preserve all the information from all those rows by just summing it up into a big number. Dimensions are qualitative attributes of data. For instance, what city the person was from, what browser they were on. And when you add up the number of sessions you have, you lose that information when you go across rows. So you can see the examples here. Yeah, basically numbers are metrics. Descriptive things, adjectives, places, things like that, those are dimensions. Just keep that in mind. It's called a dimension because it's like it's a way of separating out, never mind, this is gonna be too hard to explain. Okay, then users.
This is just a representation of like, if you scan that QR code, which is supposed to be the Las Vegas Strip, I don't really like that AI one, it will take you to a page that has all of the metric and dimension definitions for GA4 as well as UA. And really, they're going to be different numbers. Like even from year to year on the same platforms, like the numbers that you see are going to be widely different because of the way that browsers work and are consistently changing. But if you have the underlying foundation of understanding everything is a metric and dimension, it will help you a significant amount. And if you have the ability to Google, like, what is the definition of that metric? What is the definition of that dimension? You can understand the differences much more easily because you're not just saying, like, this is this thing. There's always been a definition of what a bounce rate is, what an exit rate is. It's taking this number, dividing by this, timesing by 1,000 to get a rate. Like, they do have very good documentation here. And if to make yourselves feel comfortable, I highly recommend, like, just going through this page or bookmarking it. When you're like, I don't know why this is so different, you go to this page and it will tell you exactly why it's different. Well, they use total users and they use active users. And like, it's different because this is the reason. And then you're gonna run into this quite a bit, and like, this is probably the #1 resource to like say, like, this is the difference.
Yep. No, it's essentially the eternal thing in data or measuring things. Is that it really matters what your exact concept and definition is of the thing that you're trying to measure. The number will change if you change those things. So learning those concepts, understanding them in detail is really the ultimate answer to those kinds of questions. So here's some examples of actual data. This is stuff I pulled from our data set of over 300 different DMO websites only. In the yellow bars you see there, that's average session duration. This was, of course, our big metric for measuring the length of time that people spent on our sites in Universal Analytics, which is over there on the right. You can see it was about a minute 33. That's mostly 2022 and some 2023 data that you're seeing there. These comparisons between the three sections here aren't totally apples to apples, but they give you an idea of what's going on. So a minute 33, how was that calculated in Universal Analytics? They would take all the things that they saw somebody do on the site, and they would look at the timestamp of the first one, they would look at the timestamp of the last one, they would subtract the difference, that's your time on site, your session duration. Among the problems with that is that if they spent 15 minutes reading a really great article on the last page of their page view and you didn't have any sort of scroll tracking or time on page tracking, you wouldn't get that 15 minutes included in your session duration. It would just be 0. And as a result, if you just looked at a breakdown of what the actual session duration was for each session on your site in Universal Analytics, on DMO sites, about half of them had 0 session duration. Because if somebody didn't do a second thing, there was no way to track any time they spent on your site. So, what's changed? First of all, you'll notice in GA4, and I have 2 different GA4 data sources here. The API means we're actually calling the API to get the data from GA4 that way. The export, the BigQuery export one means that's stuff we've calculated from the raw data exported to BigQuery. So interesting to just see how they do and don't match. You'll notice that the average session duration is way longer in GA4. Why is that? Partially because a lot of things like clicks and scrolling and indeed even just straight up user engagement are tracked automatically in GA4 in a way they weren't in Universal Analytics, which means we're tracking way more actions. We can see more things they're doing on the site. We're actually getting more time span captured in that. So, I mean, that's interesting just by tracking clicks and scrolls and so forth. We're able to double the amount of time we're able to see people spending on the site.
Well, on your chart, the 133 for Universal Analytics is going to be the historic average session duration, right? So
Pretty close to it, yeah.
So
it's
then
just as a benchmark, yeah.
You're calculating average session duration from GA4
Yes.
the same way between page timestamp to page timestamp?
Well, so in GA4, it's just, again, we're taking the first event and the last event. And because there are more events, we can see more time.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So it's really the comparison from the UA to the other two green bars.
Yeah,
and
so then
the comparison of the green bars to the yellow bars.
Yeah, there are multiple comparisons going on here. So the interesting thing is, yes, Universal Analytics session duration goes from 133 up to 253, 310 using the same definition of session duration, just because we're capturing more data on what people are doing on the sites. That's fascinating in and of itself. But actually, session duration is really hard to find in GA4 because they don't want you to use it. Instead, they would rather have you use engagement time, which is the green bar you see there. There is no engagement time recorded for the Universal Analytics section here because that wasn't a metric there. We have it now in GA4, and the difference is for engagement time, they have to actually have the window to your site or the screen of your app, if you're tracking an app, topmost on their device. It has to be the active window on their desktop. It has to be the app that they're looking at on their phone, whatever. And anytime that page is open but spinning in the background, it does not get counted towards engagement time. As a result, you can see that engagement time is something like a quarter of what session duration is, which is disheartening when you first realize that all the session duration you thought you were getting, even if you're going from the old Universal Analytics number, our engagement time is like half of that. On the other hand, that's how it always was. We just didn't know. So now we have a measurement for it. It's more accurate. It means that we can more precisely get at how much time we're actually getting in front of people, and we can more carefully try to increase not try to decrease, try to increase that thing because we know it's a closer representation of what people are actually doing on our sites.
I think average session time in general in GA4 is pretty terrible from an implementation standpoint. Like the fact that they use average session duration for a page level report doesn't make any sense to me. I would just say avoid it in all honesty because it's extremely different than what it was, and it feels like they're adding it in, but they're not doing so consistently. And so you can run into a lot of challenges, and you're like, is this session scoped or is it an event scope? So is it tied to an individual, like from one page to another, or for the entire session? And they use the same title for that dimension or that metric like interchangeably in some places that it doesn't make sense. So I struggle with this one because I feel like it's done very poorly from them.
I would say if you can, just switch to engagement time and start using that.
Agreed.
These little profile bubbles are very helpful. Okay, so some of the questions were around navigation and like how do I actually find what I'm looking for? And by default, they have the standard reports and they don't always give you exactly what you want, especially when it comes to the DMOs and tracking our events. But I think what's very cool is that you do have the ability to create the custom reports and then add them to your libraries. And so, sometimes I tell clients, like, there might be one person at their office who uses a certain report. I tell them to name it themselves. This is Beth's analytics report, so you know exactly where it is. But you can go in and basically create like a nested navigation using the libraries and the different, they call them topics, and nest them in together, and so you know exactly where the things are that you're looking for. But it doesn't come that way out of the box, and so if you are looking for those things, know that there's a library component in the bottom left corner, and you can go in there and basically like customize a report, add it to a library, and then it shows up on the left-hand side. So it
I'll show you a visual representation of that in the next section.
And we'll see an example. But out of the box, it is kind of difficult to find what you're looking for, but if you can customize that, you'll get a lot out of it. So that kind of answers a lot of these, like navigating around in general, everything, creating reports, finding metrics, That's all very, it's not as intuitive. Getting the UI to respond without saying internal error. That was actually my complaint that I submitted through the form because it's something that's been, I get people constantly asking me, why is this not loading? I don't know, it's an issue with the UI. And that we got a lot that said there was no training available. So we did link earlier a lot of different resources. There's actually a ton of training out there, but it's not gonna be specific to travel and tourism. It's a lot more generic. So they might be talking a lot about e-commerce that isn't as specific to your business.
These are a few resources that I happen to like. The Google Skill Shop is a free, they have a certification in there, so it's a class and a certification that you can get. And they have like a very nice, like all of their different training resources here. I think Measure School does a very good job with their training as well. And then I believe that at Loves Data, they do a nice job, and I think all their stuff is free, and their YouTube videos are actually quite good too on very specific things. So there's a lot of information out there. I would say these three, if you use them, you would basically know exactly what you need to do. Like they're all very good comprehensive resources. And I don't think I think the Measure School like actual class one has some costs, but they also have a lot of YouTube videos as well that do a very good job covering these things.
And the Google Skill Shop is what we had all of our staff go through and complete during this transition. So we really like that one a lot too.
Yeah. You can get a free I think it's a free certification.
Oh, it's already back to you.
Yeah. So this one had a lot of stuff in it around sharing and creating dashboards, how to track behavioral customer journeys, how to pull reports, setting up explorers. I love the second to last question. Like, how do you easily find a breakdown of clicks on a page by destination URL without building a report? Whoever put that one in there, I loved it because I used it as the impetus for like a whole section of this because it's actually really complicated and there's 3 or 4 different ways to do it. And then I will say the struggle with showing campaign attribution from non-Google channels, typically you're gonna be going to a traffic source type page, and then you have all of your different session-based parameters. I highly recommend using session-based attribution. That is what you had in Universal Analytics, but in GA4 there's 2. There's user-based, first user-based, and then session. So it's like, where did the person come from the first time as a user? And then like the session is basically like, where did they come like the last time they came to the site? So session-based is what you're most familiar with, and the fact that they have all these different versions make it more confusing, but if you use session-based, you'll be fine.
And also, DMO sites, typically 75 to 80% of your users are first-time visitors who've never been to the site before. So it might as well just stick with sessions. Your ongoing user journey isn't much of a thing.
So I'm gonna dive into how to easily find a breakdown of clicks on a page by destination URL without building a report. I don't know if it would be easy, but here are a couple ways of doing it, and we'll get you up to this GA4 Jesus mode here. So you'll actually see in this sidebar under business objectives, you have generate leads, drive online sales, raise brand awareness, examine user behavior. Like this is that section that I was saying was added recently in the last year, and we can click on events here. And under events, we have all the events, and this is actually for the Miles Partnership website. And so we have page view, user engagement, session start, first visit, scroll depth, scroll, outbound link, which is what we're gonna wanna use here, time on site, a media kit referral, a form start. These are all our events, right? So we have our event name, which is our dimension, and we have our event count, which is our metric, and we have the other metrics subsequently. So event count per user, total revenue, total users, that type of thing, right? So in the past, you used to be able to click this plus button and add a secondary dimension to get what you want. You can't do that here because it's not available, but you can click the name of what you want to go through. So here I'm clicking outbound link, and I'm going to the outbound link event area. And I'm gonna cross this out for a second, because if you do not set up a custom dimension or a parameter, it's not going to be there. So you're just going to have how many things happened in the last minute, where did they occur from. You have some gender stuff in there, you can see a thresholding on there. But if you set up an event parameter or custom dimension for the outbound link URL, which is a predefined parameter within GA4, it's just not accessible in the report section. So if you enable this, then you do get this little box here that will show you the individual URLs that someone clicked on. So that is available, but it's probably not the best solution. And there's also a lot of debate whether or not you take the standard event parameters that come out of the box, which are on that page that I had the QR code to, where it will like list them out, and you make that a custom dimension so it's available within the reporting interface, because they're available within explores, but they're not available within standard reports. And if you add them as custom, now they show up 2 times in Explore. So like, I don't have the answer to that. Sometimes we enable them, and sometimes we don't. When we enable them, people are like, why is it there twice? And when we don't enable them, people are like, why isn't it here? So like, it's kind of a double-edged sword, and we feel like we can't win on this one because everyone wants it the different way. But like, there's not a perfect solution here, but you can enable a event parameter as a custom dimension, and it will show up as a parameter in the report when you click through to that specific page. So, Justin talked about the library. The library is super powerful. The library is where you can actually build custom reports that will show up in this sidebar. So we have one under lifecycle, engagement, page path, and outbound links. We'll go to that in a second. So we're going to build a custom report. We're going to go into our library, and we're going to click Create New Report, and then we're going to add it to a section. We can build that report by adding metrics and dimensions over here in this right-hand sidebar. So here what we've done is we've added the link URL as a standard parameter, and we've added the page path and screen class. And then we've added the metric of event count. So how many times did this thing occur? It will automatically build this little table for you. It will build a little chart and the timeline up at the top, and you now have a custom report, if you will. Then that can be added to that bar under lifecycle or under business objectives or wherever you want, to Justin's point. You could call this Beth's report if this is what Beth cares about. And what it will do is it will show you all the link URLs broken down by page path and screen class. One thing to note that I find super frustrating is that you can't actually say, I only want the event count for a certain event. I can get total event count, but then I have to make this little drop down here, say outbound link, or I'm counting all of the events occur for all events. But this is not a terrible way of looking at what are the outbound links by pages on the website and how many times did someone click that link and having it as a standard report. This is about as best as you're going to be able to do to get that. So I don't know if that was easy, but that is a solution. I don't love it. I really don't love that you have to use that drop-down box every time you go to the report. There's no way to save that, but it does kind of work. So the better solution is to probably create an Explore. So we're going to go through that process as well. So in the Explorers, we go into the Explorers section. I usually just create a blank one because if you don't, you have to delete a bunch of segments and stuff. So I create a blank Explorer. I'll go through and I'll add my dimensions and my metrics. And then you typically have a couple places here. You have rows, you have columns, and you have values. So I need to get my dimensions and metrics on all the way on the left-hand side as my variables. I need to set my date range. I could also add segments or audiences here if I want. We don't need to go into that for here, but I'm going to add the event name. I'm going to add my custom dimension for outbound link. I'm going to add the standard one for link URL. There's a flag variable, which basically means it's a Boolean, true, false. Is this click outbound, or is it true or false? So you can use that to filter, so she'll only show me outbound link clicks. And then I want my page path and screen class. I don't really love that dimension for the name of the page, but it's the one that's most used within the interface, so I tend to use that. And then I add my metric of event count and view, and then I take those and I put my event name and my values, and this gives me basically a representation of the event report that you just saw in the primary UI, right? Then from there, I want to add my page to it, and I want to filter by event name exactly matches outbound link. And so now I can basically say, here are the total number of events for a page, say join us and do job applications or advertising for San Francisco travel, and here's the number of times someone clicked on that because I'm only filtering to that outbound link event. So that is a pretty good way of building this report. And then I can save that with a name under Explorers, but it will not show up in the reports interface, which is sort of like that thing where it's like you have two systems where they don't really combine to each other. It gets a little bit more complicated because let's say I want to add views to this so I can see the page views and the link clicks to then maybe make a percentage. I can't do those two things together because the views metric is just a renaming of the page view event. And I've already filtered to only show me outbound links for the event name. So I can't do that. And so now I'm kind of like, I can only get the outbound links things here, or I need another tab to give me page views, and then I need to recorrelate them back together. Kind of a pain, right? I can maybe go through and see about making the column the event name. So now I have the page that I want, and I can get the total number of outbound links on the join us page for 1650, and I can get the total page views of 1623. So now I can see the total amount of page views divided by the total number of outbound links to get an outbound link percentage for that page, but I don't have the actual URL in that case. So let me add that. Well, that's fun. Now they're on 2 separate rows because they're not the same dimensions. So that doesn't really work out as well as I would have wanted. And so then I'm like, screw it. I'll just go to the Google Sheets and use a free plugin and get it that way. So the Explore works, but again, you're limited unless you have multiple tabs. I'd probably go that way, but it won't be available in the standard reporting interface. GA4 Magic Reports is a free plugin. Google Analytics actually has a free, like, Google-made Google Sheets plugin. It's terrible. It is awful. Like, they have fields to put in, like, your filters for your metrics and dimensions. Those fields don't work, and they have never worked. And in all their forums for, like, bugs, people are like, this doesn't work. And, like, they're like, yeah, we know. We'll get to it at some point. Sorry. And, like, it just doesn't work well. So there's one called Magic Reports. You can donate to the guy, but it's free. And you can go in here and you can build your reports in Google Sheets. And they have good documentation. And you can basically, this is a tip that I love and hate that I was going to share with you all. If you ever want to create a new Google Doc or a new Google Sheet, if you type in sheets.new in your browser, it will create a new spreadsheet for you. Very powerful. You don't have to go to both places. You will end up getting a lot of untitled spreadsheets in your top level of your Google Drive, which I tend to have like 400 or 500 at a time, and then have to like move them out of the way and like hide them. But it's a very good tip. So once you run that report, you probably want to use the Query Explorer, which will show you all the dimension and metrics so you know what you're pulling there. There is a little sidebar. Highly recommend this website. It's been around for a long time. Google endorses it. And then you can run this report, and it will show you, like, here's the actual report from the property, here's the date range, here are the total rows, the rows returned. It actually I love the data accuracy. Is there a cardinality issue? Is there a thresholding? And is there sampling? So you can basically see if they're sampling your data or there's some sort of issue. I get my full page URL, I get my link URL, I get the event name of outbound link and my event count, and then I can schedule that to run on whatever cadence that I want. Again, free tool. It's a little bit more complicated, but if you're going to use something over and over again, you can also email this to yourself as a trigger from Google Sheets to get it every day. That may be the way I would go. So is it easy to create that report? Probably not. Are there 3 or 4 ways to do it and get what you want? Yes. Justin, you want to talk about these two real quick?
Yeah, I'll talk about the funnel real quick. So a lot of people, this was one of the things they added into the exploration that we were looking forward to. This looks at one of our our hospitality clients, and they had a very, let's say, fun time with their booking engine provider. And so what we noticed when we were going through this, we set up this funnel, and we could see that 82% of people were abandoning from the point when they began checkout and added their payment information. And that felt like a lot because that abandonment rate, to me, really stands out compared to the rest of these, right? For the most part, we have like 13%, 38%, like they're a little bit lower, but all of a sudden it drops. And so what we were able to do is to go through an exercise with them and kind of go through that process with a bunch of different variables and figure out what was happening. Well, the problem in this booking engine is it wasn't reflecting the true price of what they were about to purchase until they entered all their payment information. And so people got to that part of this process, and in a lot of cases, that price was going up pretty significantly because they were adding on all of their taxes and fees and a lot of the different add-ons that they had added on, but it weren't being reflected in that process. And so now we're able to go back and work with their booking engine and get all that stuff updated so that people aren't getting that sticker shock. But going through this, I think really nailed down where that problem was, and then we were able to kind of dig through the specifics on the website, which we found to be very powerful.
Hey, Justin, let's skip this and let Paul go, because he has some good slides at the end and we're running out of time.
And this is just reverse goal pathing, which also cool. But
Thank you.
Sorry, like I said, we haven't run through this before, so I'm looking at the timer up here. I'm like, Paul has some really good stuff that I want you guys to get, so let's let him go at this.
Technical issues and data concerns, a few more questions grouped together. So some people complained about the delay for receiving website data. Certainly, you should have near real-time data of some sort, but final numbers may change for a few days for sure. Even in the BigQuery export stuff comes in late. Throttling, I presume that this thresholding might have been what was meant there, but yeah, absolutely. If you look up your number of sessions on the, say, the channel breakdown report, and then you look it up on the page report, you'll get 2 different totals a lot of times because of thresholding, basically. then the homepage dashboard not showing data past 18 months. And then some questions about cookie deprecation, which I'll actually address first because I think that's very interesting. And then some other things about how we're doing it with our book direct engine and UTMs. So first of all, on the last one on UTMs still work. You can still do it. You showed earlier there are 3 more fields even.
And I think 18 months is probably geared to actually when you converted to GA4, because that's about the time frame from July of what.
Also a thing, but like we were saying earlier, a lot of the things in the report side, a lot of details do go away unless you go over to the Explorer side after 14 months. So there's a thing. Okay, so this is about the cookieless stuff. Most US sites, almost all of them, are still just, putting GA4 cookies on people's sites. You might have a cookie consent banner, but there's no legal requirement to actually let them say no to everything, the way there is in Europe, where it gets a lot more intense, and also places like Brazil. So this is a site that's not in the US, and they do have a cookie consent pop-up that gives users every opportunity to say no. Do not track me, I'm saying no to analytics cookies. And so when that happens, essentially, we mentioned in GA4, all the events that come in, each one is a row. Every time somebody does something on your site, we track, a page view, a scroll, or whatever. If people say no to cookies, we no longer get the piece of information that says it was this one was this user, and this one was another user, and this one was another user. It just looks, it could be any user. We can see their different devices. We can see what device they're on. We might be able to see their geographical information. But of course, there could be 2 people on the latest iPhone in New York City visiting your site at the same time. So you really can't tell those things apart too well. I actually tried that. I tried to reconstruct the number of users on the site just by straight, dumbly looking at their location and their device and saying, if I just broke it down by that, can I recreate the number of users that GA4 is seeing? And the answer was no. They're doing quite a bit more than that. So when that happens, we don't know who the user is who did the event, and we also don't know which events were grouped into the same sessions. And so Google, so what happens when you do that is all of a sudden your number of sessions gets really low, and your number of users gets really low, possibly down to near 0. You're only tracking the ones that say yes to analytics. And on this site, the vast majority of people were saying no to analytics tracking. Now, eventually what happens is, and I'll actually skip ahead here, when users don't grant consent, here's where it explains all that. It can't observe and report when people say no, whether that's 10 users or 1 user. So what they do is they just look at the number of all the events you have for a period where you did have a lot of people saying yes to cookies, so that they actually do know, okay, we had all these events before, we had this number of page views, we had this number of session starts, we had this number of that, the other. And we were able to actually directly measure and observe this many users, this many sessions. Okay, now we'll do some machine learning. We know this kind of event set produces this many users and sessions. Cool, so now for this other period where we don't have cookies, we don't actually know which users and sessions it was, we'll just apply that information there and we'll we'll guess how many users and sessions you had. Now, if you look in the bottom paragraph, as they say, this leads to some weird things, because they need enough sessions where people said yes to cookies to do the training to be able to then give you an estimate on the other data. So what can happen is that you might get up to the threshold where they can do the training, they can see how many users you had, and they can estimate that, but then you actually go back below the threshold again and they have to take the data away. So it's really crazy, it's really screwy, and if you see here, it's not necessarily even that accurate. So this is that site I was mentioning to you that has almost all its users saying no to cookies. In yellow, we have their Google Search Console clicks. So this is a very good representation of organic Google search traffic to the site. If you look at this on most sites, and then you compare that line to their number of organic sessions from Google, they will be very close to each other. Here, though, you see with the green line where I'm doing that, I'm getting their number of organic sessions in GA4 from Google, which is not an actually directly observed and measured number, because most people are saying no to cookies here, but this is Google doing its machine learning to guess how many users, or how many sessions were actually on the site from the different sources. And you can see that Google's estimates are actually way higher than the number of clicks, and I checked, this should be apples to apples. You can see they move directionally in the same direction to some degree. For instance, when Search Console clicks rise in the new year, about 3/4 of the way through the chart, you can see the level of the green goes up somewhat to match that, but the spikes are not matching. Just generally, you can see that the Google guessing of what people were doing on the site is perhaps better than nothing, but not nearly as accurate as just actually measuring things.
And some of their other predictive things, which are actually really cool, you have to be at a threshold of 1,000 actions per day.
That's the number
when
they
it starts
give.
to work, and most of our sites aren't getting 1,000 of like whatever event that you want to measure per day to use the predictive churn or purchase or lead of predictive like events on them.
Yeah, so all this is to say that a cookieless future for direct first-party on-the-site analytics is going to be a lot less accurate and useful, at least if we're using the tools we are right now. These sites that are, again, in foreign areas where they really need to let people decline most of the time, just have a really tough time measuring their traffic. They don't have good numbers on what people are doing. So if those are major KPIs for you, start preparing people now. There's not necessarily a date when most US users are going to be able to do this, but it could happen. Certainly be thinking about it for the future. Just a couple other things I wanted to mention about the technical things that we can do with the exported data that I mentioned earlier. So I have 50 seconds. Let's see how I can do this. What's really cool is that we can get this data out of GA4 with the export in all the detail we need, and then we can put it in other tools. So for instance, here we've got it in our data engine, and I'm able to show, which is built on Redshift, not even BigQuery, but I'm able to have the data from the client, and I'm able to show their engagement rate versus the industry's engagement rate and their region's engagement rate all side by side. Thanks to that export, I'm able to have this in a whole other visualization tool. Very nice, very easy. We're also able to do industry benchmarks really well with it. I mean, we used the API for this before, but I take advantage of the export to collect a lot more detail on the data. You can filter this data set by like the landing page topic or the device or the distance from the destination because of the export.
Google does have an analytics hub, which is like their clean room, which we have been using to share back and forth between clients, because one of the limitations of the BigQuery export is it can only go to one place.
Yeah.
So if you're working with multiple agencies, you have to figure out a way to share it. So
yeah,
that
we've
happens
set that up
the best
between
way.
ourselves, and it's great. Real quick, a couple other things. Custom KPIs. You can do this with audiences, but now with this, we can actually set it as a session metric where we can just invent what we want to be a highly engaged session, and then we can do it. Okay, I'll jump off right after this. But there was a question about the book direct thing, and what I think is really cool about GA4 is we were able to use it as the analytics, the sort of Bible of tracking on our book direct booking platform where people can refer out to lodging businesses in the destination. We never could have done this in Universal Analytics, because you can see we're tracking things like the length of the stay that they're searching for, the time in advance. We're tracking their location, the location they're searching for, the type of accommodations, all this stuff that if we just had category action label, we never would have been able to capture it well, certainly not in a way that was then easy to
You could do it in
analyze.
custom metrics and dimensions, but it would throw off the API queries that if that wasn't set and it was null, then you would get very skewed results.
Exactly, yeah. It's way better now with custom parameters. And then not with the BigQuery export, what we're able to do is take all that very raw data, the row by row level of what people clicked on, and then we're able to transform it and shape it in whatever way we need to then turn it into a report in a whole other platform on all the things people are doing it. And not only that, because it's in GA4, we get to take advantage of all the things that GA4 does automatically, like track the location or the channel that people use to come to your site, their actual geolocation. If we were just doing this as a first-party server-side analytics thing, it would have been a whole pain to recreate all that stuff. But it's just here in GA4, and now we can do it. So
and you could create an audience from it and then push it to Google Ads so that you could have a dynamic remarketing list of people that have searched for attractions but have not, or hotels that have not yet booked them.
Exactly.
And that will just automatically feed itself. So there's a lot of possibilities here.
Exactly. And then we're doing the same thing with referrals on just our regular partner listings. We built a very detailed tracking schema in GA4, and we're able to pull that data out and then turn it into cool reports that have custom dimensions like the display level, how much people paid for their appearance for the listing on the site. And then we're able to include traffic channel and then break all those things like impressions, views, referrals, and so forth down by traffic channel, which with our current reporting, which is all based within our CRM, none of that is there because it's not GA4 and it's not just built in like that. So really powerful to be able to have this level of detail on tracking, then get the data out and do whatever we need to. And I think that's one of the reasons I am somewhat glad we have GA4 despite all the complaints we've had so far today.
So we hopefully answered all these learning and adaptation questions as well through that process, and ultimately we wanted to do live questions from the floor. We ran out of time. We'll be here for a little bit if you guys want to come up. And ultimately, thank you. When you put these sessions together, it's really hard to know like where everyone's at individually, but we hope like everyone got something out of this, and hopefully thank you and bless you on your analytics journey after.